We are very honored to have Dr. Rakesh Verma from the University of Houston joining us today, where he will be speaking about deception and persuasion detection in text data. Dr. Verma is a professor in computer science at the University of Houston, where he leads the reasoning and data analytics for security group. He has He's published a book in cybersecurity analytics in 2019 and has over 150 papers in leading journals and has presented at multiple conferences. He's an associate editor for the Frontiers in Big Data Journal for Cybersecurity and has won numerous awards and presented at conferences in cybersecurity over the previous few years. Without having to go fully into his CV here, I think we'll let Dr. Verma go ahead and start off his talk. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to list them out in the Q&A box as discussed before, or in the chat box, whichever you feel more comfortable with using. Dr. Verma, the floor is yours. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and good evening, everybody. I can't see the chat box here in presentation mode, so if somebody can monitor that and let me know if there are questions, that would be great.
Sure. I'll keep track of any questions that are being asked.
All right. Thank you. And so today I'll be talking about deception and persuasion detection in text data, and mainly focusing on deception because of the time constraints. So let's get started on that. Oh, that's interesting. It won't let me advance the slides. Okay. Here are some of the current projects in our group. Before I get into the topic of the talk, I thought it might be interesting for you to know what else we are working on. So besides deception detection, we are working on natural language processing workbench. And here we are including both fundamental operations such as idiom detection, special phrases which have different meaning when the words come together. For example, kick the bucket can mean a cow kicked the bucket when it was being milked, or it could also mean somebody left the world. So because it's an idiom. And so fundamental phrases like idioms, collocations, etc., that we want to automatically detect from the text, and also bigger operations such as automatic summarization, question answering, and so on. In summarization, you may be given a set of documents, and you may be asked to construct automatically a summary of the documents, right? And in question answering, you're given a set of documents and a list of questions, and you're supposed to answer the questions based on the information in the given documents. So these we also participated in several shared tasks and competitions organized by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And we did quite well on some of those tasks in automatic summarization and question answering. Another project that we are working on is detecting automatically bugs in software. There is a large amount of code available, which, although has gone through fuzzing, but still you're not sure that, and some of it also is legacy code that hasn't gone through fuzzing at all. And you can't be sure that it's correct unless, you actually verify it. So which is in itself a very cumbersome and challenging task to verify software, and undecidable in general. So therefore, what we have done is we are working on machine learning to automatically identify vulnerable areas in code. And the final project that I'll mention today is adversarial machine learning. So the security of artificial intelligence models, such as large language models, ChatGPT, and so on. And with that, let's move on to deception and persuasion detection. So, I did this exercise last month. I looked at, research papers on DBLP database on various topics which involve deceptive attacks, such as phishing. So, in October, we had roughly 1,800 papers on phishing alone, and that had phishing in the title. And for fake news, we had almost 2,000 papers. For opinion spam or fake reviews, close to 300 papers. And, I also did some searches with job scams and, sextortion and so on. And so I found roughly about 100 other, such papers on other kinds of deceptive attacks. So altogether, we are looking at, 4,000 or so papers on these various deceptive text attacks. Now, what this suggests is that if you are sent a message, then you should first, send it through a phishing filter, then a fake news filter, then a fake review filter, then maybe a romance scam, a job scam filter, and so on. Right. So this requires quite a bit of processing sequentially and adds up to time. And the other option is to do some parallel processing, send the message to all these filters and see which one detects an attack, right? So that requires more resources. Although it saves time, it requires more resources in terms of, machine learning models nowadays. They can be pretty large, we consume a lot of memory and processing power and so on. So what we are thinking about is whether we can do this. Replace all these different filters with just one filter, or maybe a small subset, 2 or 3 at most, rather than one for each kind of deceptive attack. So is that possible? And that's what we are going to look at very carefully in this talk. And also, I'll spend some time on persuasion detection that we worked on. So with that, let's get started. Here is an outline of the rest of my talk. So we'll look at what exactly is deception. We'll give a new taxonomy for it. We'll focus on whether there are linguistic cues for deception, which are general enough so that you can catch all kinds of deceptive attacks. And we'll look at some classification results, with and without deep learning. And I will wrap up with some key takeaways and directions for the future. So let's start by defining deception. And here's a definition that I took from the literature. It's in a book by Professor Galasinski, which came out in 2000 on deception. I think he called it the language of deception. And Galasinski defined deception as an intentional act of manipulation to gain compliance. And I've highlighted intentional. It has at least one source, one target, and one goal. And Galasinski, wants the source to be intentionally manipulating the target into either beliefs or actions or both, intended to achieve the goals of the deceiver. Now, we have a problem because we cannot check intentions. Unfortunately, we don't have any access to the attackers. These messages are coming via either the telephone network or the simple messaging service network or the email network, and there is no way we can get hold of the attacker and ask them whether they wanted to deceive us or not, right? So intentions are notoriously hard to check. And so we want a new computational definition of deception, which does not revolve around intentions. So the way we define deception is it's an act of manipulation designed to gain compliance, such that exposing either the manipulation or the compliance goals significantly decreases the chance of compliance. It has, of course, at least one source, one target, and at least one goal. Now, this kind of definition can actually be formalized using the probability theory framework. And if you're familiar with Markov decision processes, then this may sound familiar to you. We denote by A any action taken by an agent or an actor. We call C a desired compliance state. And with KAT, I'm going to denote the action with the full and truthful explanation of the actor's relevant private information to target T, right? So basically the knowledge that the attacker has, the goals, the compliance goals, and also the manipulation that the attacker is doing is all revealed in KAT. And now we consider whether the probability given this knowledge, the probability of compliance given this knowledge is lower than the probability of compliance given just A alone, right? And so we say action A deceives T if the probability with knowledge is lower than the probability without the knowledge, just the action. Now we can also quantize this deception by taking a parameter theta and looking at whether the probability with knowledge, the probability of compliance with knowledge is lower than the probability of compliance with just the action alone minus this parameter theta, right? So this definition I claim can be actually used in practice. And let me give you a simple example to convince you that this definition can be used in practice. There was this recent case of a Florida woman who sued the company Kraft, saying that the claim of Kraft that ready in 3.5 minutes on the label of their microwavable product is deceptive, right? It's the Velveeta shells and cheese product. And she said that this is deceptive and it takes much longer than 3.5 minutes. And so we can construct an experiment like this. We present the product by itself to a group of random consumers. And so this is our control group. And then we give the product with an explanation that the 3.5 minutes does not include the time to add water. And we give this to our, treatment group, right? The control group versus the treatment group. And we look at whether there is a statistically significant decrease in purchases of product, which is the desired compliance, right? With the explanation. If that happens, then we say that the claim is deceptive. We don't need access to the craft engineers or craft designers who came up with the product or the advertisers who came up with the catchphrase 3.5 minutes, right? So we don't need to examine their intentions, their minds, etc., right? Their neural networks. And we can determine whether this claim is deceptive or not. And similarly, you can construct other experiments like this for other situations which are deceptive. With that, I'm going to move on to a new taxonomy of deception. So what we say is the following. Once we have this definition, it naturally leads to several components. So those are the explicit components. What are the explicit components? The agents, the sources and the targets, or sometimes I use the term actors. And then stratagems for manipulation, right? Because there's some manipulation going on, so there must be some strategy for manipulation. And of course, there are the goals. And then there are the mechanisms of exposure or threats, as we call them sometimes. And if you're curious to dig deeper into the taxonomy, I won't have too much time to go into it. If you're curious to go deeper, then I will include references at the end so you can, dig deeper into this taxonomy as well as the definition. Then there are certain implicit ingredients, right? What is the motivation behind these goals, right? What is the channel through which these messages or these attacks are coming to the targets from the sources? What is the modality of deception, right? The deception could be in the text, the deception could be in images, or it could be multimodal, the text and then the images don't match. So you have to, look at both of them together and then piece the information from them. And then, of course, the time and the manner, right? For example, is it happening in real time, synchronously? Is the source calling the attacker? I mean, sorry, the target, and trying to convince them of giving them, their credit card information and so on? Or is it happening over a long period of time, right? Through multiple calls and so on. Or maybe some of the interactions are not phone calls, they were asynchronous. So all these is considered under time and manner. And then we get hold of this taxonomy now, where deception sits at the top, and then we have the explicit components on your left hand side and the implicit components on your right hand side. And you can see the agents, the manipulation, the goals, the exposure, the channel, the modality, the manner, and the motivation. And then there are, of course, subtrees below each one of them, right? But I don't have time today to go through those subtrees, interesting as they are. For example, there is a huge subtree under manipulation, right? Because manipulation involves either evasion or persuasion. And similarly, there is a huge subtree under motivation, and so on. So if you are really curious about the subtrees, you can write to me and I can send you the detailed article, because it's in a revised version of the archive article that I have as listed in the references. Now I want to move on to, are there, general linguistic cues for deception detection? And so before I get started, I do want to mention this debate that's been going on. There is a group of researchers who claim that there are no general linguistic cues for, deception detection, right? So they claim that, in the picture that I had in the beginning, where I had just one detector for deceptive attacks, that's impossible according to them. Well, we did examine their claims and we looked at what kind of data sets their claims were based on. So here is a little classification of existing data sets. There are basically three kinds of data sets that people have come up with. There are what I call laboratory data sets. There are lots of studies involving students in the lab, or maybe company employees being asked to deceive in pairs, right? One person is trying to deceive the other in the pair, and so they randomly pair the students or the employees, and then they set up a situation where one employee or student has to deceive another. And those are laboratory situations. Then there are the real world data sets, right? Deceptive websites, court cases in which people have actually lied, to protect themselves from lengthier prison terms and so on, penalties. And of course, mailboxes where phishing attacks are sitting and so on. So these I call the real world data sets. And then there are some people who have actually mixed these together. Let me give you an example. They may pull, legitimate emails by Hillary Clinton because they were put on the, website by WikiLeaks. And they may pull, deceptive emails from Amazon Mechanical Turkers or some other service like equivalent service. So in that case, what you have is a mixture of laboratory and real world data sets. And my claim is, which we are still, in the process of testing right now, is that when there is no real incentive to lie, the lies are not necessarily as good as the ones in the real world, right? So in the lab, when one student is trying to deceive another, there is no real incentive, right? It's just a task that they have to do. And maybe, they were given a couple of dollars or sometimes not even that for doing that task, right? And so there is no real incentive for them to deceive the other student. I mean, as long as, they put some falsehood out there, their job is done, right? So that's one of my claims, that the laboratory data sets are not necessarily going to be as good as the real world data sets. And so, many of the studies that people looked at for general linguistic cues were based on laboratory or mixed data sets. And there were very few actually that were based on real world data sets. So that itself is a red flag, because it tells me that maybe those were not really authentic, deception examples. And so we need to focus on authentic examples. So that's why we are moving towards a new data set for deception, in which we are only trying to keep authentic deception and legitimate examples. So, for example, we have real phishing data sets where actual phishing emails have been shared, and some have been collected by us, and some have been shared by others. And fake news, we have fake news articles that have been checked for whether they contain fake news or not. We have political statements, which are actual statements given by politicians, and they have been checked for whether they are lies or whether they are, on the truthful. And some of them are mixed, right? So you have to draw a borderline and say that, okay, as long as there is, let's say, some deceptive content, we are going to consider it a lie. Then there are the fake product reviews that have been made available by companies such as Amazon and others, Yelp, etc. We also have a job scams data set from researchers in Greece. And then we are also considering right now adding, messaging and tweets and other kinds of scams, because these are mostly, longer text articles, so to speak. Yeah. But the political statements is the only one which has, short sentences generally, but the others are usually paragraph or two. So here are some statistics about the data set, right? So product reviews on top. You can see it's quite balanced, the number of fake product reviews versus the number of truthful fake reviews, quite close to each other. The average word length of the data set is about 70 words. Phishing, not balanced, but close to being balanced. About 6,000 phishing attacks and about 9,000 truthful. The average word length is for each attack is pretty long, 379 words. For job scams, it's a highly imbalanced data set with only 608 job scams and about 14,000 truthful job offers. And the average length of the scams as well as the actual offers is about 200 words. For political statements, you can see the average word length is pretty low, 18. And again, this is close to being balanced, not really, equal, but close, because the number of fake political statements is about 5,700 and the truthful 7,000. And the fake news is the largest data set. It's also not balanced. And it also has the longest articles, about 559 words. And we did a visualization of these data sets. As you can see, using TSNE, and we projected in 2 dimensions so that you can see it nicely. And you can see that there is some separation in the data sets, but you can see the fake news especially is scattered, and you can find these purple dots in other clusters as well. And similarly the email benchmarking, that's the phishing data set. And the phishing data set also, you can find the dots, orange dots in the red cluster as well as the blue cluster, and in the green cluster, and some in the purple one in the fake news cluster. So it's just pretty spread out. The orange cluster especially. And the green is more well defined, the blue and the red is also spreading out. as you can see. Of course, we don't know the real story, right? Because this is a two-dimensional projection. Maybe in a high-dimensional space, these things are very well clustered and separated from each other, but we can't make it out from this two-dimensional space. So anyway, we'll take a look at our classifier results and get an idea of what's going on. So what kind of linguistic cues we are going to look at for deception detection? So we are looking at actually several sources. Our main source is this linguistic inquiry and word count program that was devised by researchers, social science researchers in UT Austin. And they have the different versions of that. So we are using the 2022 version, and they have about 100 plus set of linguistic cues, and they also have things like word count, average word count, and so on. So not all of them are really properly speaking linguistic, but even word counts may be considered linguistic to some extent. So, and then we are using additional features from several other sources. So for example, all those student inquiries, right, that the student experiments in the lab where one student was trying to convince the other of something fake. We also gathered features from those papers and so on to see, which features are actually relevant for general deception detection. A little bit about the models. So we are looking at some deep learning models, and we are also looking at some classical models, non-deep learning. And so here we have versions of BERT and Roberta, and we're going to use them in our experiments. We'll also use things like gradient boosting, random forest, and so on. So we have results on all kinds of classifiers. Now let's focus on the BERT and Roberta. We have both large and smaller versions of these transformer models. So here we have, after thorough cleaning of the data sets, because we did discover some issues such as HTML, non-English, and so on and so forth in those raw data sets. So we cleaned them up, and then we ran these classifiers. And in this experiment, we are training the classifiers on a single domain. Okay. And then we are testing on multiple domains, right? So for example, we may train the classifier on just the product reviews data set. And then we test it on product reviews, phishing, job scams, political statements, and fake news. Now, of course, when we train on product reviews, we take about 80% of the data set for training and leave the remaining 20% for testing. As you can see on the diagonal, when we train and test on the same data set, but different subsets, training and test subset, we are getting pretty good results. For phishing, for example, it's almost close to 99%. And this table is for the F1 score, which is the harmonic mean of recall and precision. And so here, almost 99%, since the data sets are not really balanced, the F1 score is a little bit more meaningful than accuracy. And also for the job scams, again, 98.2%. Then for political statements, it's pretty low, right? 59.4%. For fake news, it's almost close to 100%. For product reviews, it's somewhere in the middle. Not as bad as political statements, not as good as phishing, job scams, and fake news. But there are 3 data sets already that, one classifier trained on a single domain is doing so well, right? So this gives us hope that a small subset of classifiers can do the job. All right. And what happens when we train on all domains? So in this case, what we do is we take 80% of every data set for training and leave 20% for testing. And now you can see that, some interesting things are happening. Between these 4 models, it turns out that the BERT model, which is not the large one, L stands for large here, the smaller BERT model is doing very well indeed. It's achieving very good accuracy on product reviews on phishing is close to training on the phishing and testing on phishing, and then on fake news also is very good, right? 99%. Again, these are F1 scores. Roberta is not doing so well, and is supposed to be a better version of BERT. And then BERT large is only succeeding on job scams to beat the remaining models. And Roberta large only beats the other models on political statements. And still the result is not that great. It's better than the previous slide, right, where we had 59 point something. Here we have almost 62%. So training on multiple data sets is helping. As you can see, it's helping Roberta large achieve the best results on the political statements. And Roberta is not too far behind. BERT is a little bit further behind. Now, let's focus on the linguistic cues from LIWC. And so now you're looking at F scores using just the LIWC features. And the columns here are pretty interesting. Let me explain what they mean. What we do is we look at the features, the LIWC features, and we identify which features are significant for at least one data set. That's the 1+ column. Which features are significant for at least 2 data sets? That's the 2+ column, and so on, 3+, 4+, and 5. We have 5 data sets, so we are looking at in the 5 significant column, we are only looking at those features which are statistically significant using, t-tests, for example, on all 5 data sets. And here the classifiers are random forest. So we are just using random forest. You can see that random forest is doing a pretty good job. And in fact, it's able to do a very good job with features that are significant in, for example, at least three data sets, right? So if you look at the 3+ significant column, we have 96 for job scams, again, F scores. And for fake news, it's not as good as the deep learning models. It's 90, whereas the deep learning models were at 98 or 99. For product reviews, it's pretty good, 64, not as good as the deep learning models, which were at 70. Political statements, it's at 58. And I've given the standard deviations in parentheses. So we actually take multiple runs and then compute the average and the standard deviation and report these in the table. So you can see that the standard deviation is not that high. Only in rare cases, it's over 1%. And, you see 1.5 sometimes and 1.2 sometimes. But other than that, it's 1% or below. And for political statements, it's at 58%. For phishing, it's at 95%. Now, the interesting thing is that if you look at the individual column, here we are looking at the features which are significant for that data set, and we are using only those features for doing the training and testing, right? Again, same way, 80% for training, 20% for testing. So only job scams is at 96 with the individual features that are significant for that data set alone, right? Compare with the 3+ column with the individual column, right? You will see that only job scams is at 96, right? Equal. The others, if you use the features that are significant in fake news for fake news detection, we are only getting 88, plus or minus 0.6. Versus if you use features which are significant in at least 3 data sets, we are getting 90% F score. And again, plus minus 0.6%. Product reviews, 62 versus 64. And 62 with higher standard deviation, 64 with lower standard deviation. Political statements, 55 versus 58. The standard deviation is very small when we are using 3+ significant features. And the standard deviation is 0.6 when we are using individually significant features, and phishing 94 versus 95. So you can see that, just using the features that are significant for that data set and then using those features for detection is worse off than using features from other data sets. So this does help us answer the question whether there are general linguistic features for deception, because features from other data sets are helping, right, improve the detection on for example, fake news, product reviews, political statements, phishing, all of that. And you can look at these results. I don't have time to go through all of them here. I will move on now to persuasion detection. And the persuasion detection was actually a very interesting task. They had a multilingual, and also multi-class, multi-label classification for persuasion. We are looking at the task number 3, subtask number 3 of SEMEVAL 2023. And so we participated in that, and we got pretty good results across 6 different languages, including English and Italian, Russian, and so on. And here is a slide showing, our approach. We took the XLM Roberta model in this case, and we combined that with language agnostic feature embeddings. So we take the embedding that's coming from the XLM Roberta model and then combine those with embeddings coming from this, left-hand side module labeled persuasion features. Right. So what we do is we first do automatic language detection, then we extract the features using translators, and then those embeddings are concatenated together with the embeddings coming from the XLM Roberta model, and then that goes into a dropout layer, a linear layer, and finally a sigmoid layer. And we got, as I said, pretty good results with this model, and several teams participated for each language. Some teams only focused on one language. Some teams were on, doing multiple languages. So we were doing multiple languages, and we were in the top 10 for six different languages. And in fact, after the competition, we continued to do some improvements, and we were able to achieve scores, that beat the best models from the competition for certain languages, not all languages, but certain languages. And with that, I'm going to move on to some disinformation detection work that we did recently in Arabic language. This was a shared task at the Arabic NLP conference. And here they had Twitter data sets. This was one of the motivations for us to participate in this, because so far the data sets we have looked at were, not from social media. So we said, let's see how our models are working on social media data sets, so Twitter data sets in particular. And of course, you're all aware that the Twitter data sets have challenges such as code switching, multiple languages in the same tweet. Bilingual speakers or multilingual speakers will switch between different languages. They'll say something in English, then something in Spanish, something in Hindi, and so on in the same tweet. And then, of course, there are also emojis and dialects and noise in the tweets that one has to deal with. So what we did was we did a large amount of input pre-processing to handle noise, dialects, emojis, code switching, and so on. And then we used an ensemble of transformer models. And this time it's micro F1 metric. The conference organizers wanted to use the micro F1, not the macro F1. And the baselines that the organizers came up with were around 70% on the micro F1. And we were able to achieve slightly over 90% micro F1 scores with our input pre-processing and ensemble models. And they had multiple tasks. We participated on task 1 and task 2, and task 2A and 2B, we were the top team, right? The task 2A and 2B were on disinformation detection, and task 1A and 1B were on persuasion detection. And the team that was working on persuasion detection actually had to take a flight, and so they were pressed for time and submitted the wrong file. So anyway, so we didn't come out on top on task 1, but on task 2A and 2B we did quite well. So what are the key takeaways from this work that I've described to you today? And so one of the main takeaways is that features that are deemed significant in a majority of the data sets perform better than using feature sets which are tailored to each data set. And you might say, oh, the feature sets that are significant in a majority of the data sets, maybe you have a lot more features that way. And, that's not true, because if you look at the number of features that were significant in 3 or more, there were 87 different features. Whereas if you look at the individual feature sets, they range from 38, the smallest number, and to 112. Right? So we had some feature sets larger and some feature sets smaller, and still the 3+ significant came out better. And of course, the persuasion detection task, I haven't told you much about it. There are like, I don't know, 20+ different, techniques for persuasion that they wanted us to catch. And so, some techniques are easier to catch than others. But the takeaways need more analysis there, because, we are not sure. We had one approach in the persuasion detection for different languages, in another approach in Arabic, right? So therefore we still need more analysis, make sure everything is uniform, and then analyze everything to make sure that we have the right features for persuasion detection. So I'm not going to list any features right now for persuasion detection, but there are some interesting features that I do want to mention for the case of deception, right? So people think that when somebody is trying to deceive, somebody else, they will use certain kinds of pronouns and certain kinds of modifiers, modals, and so on. And it turns out that, yes, they do turn out to be significant in this generalized deception data set, and which contains all these 5 different kinds of attacks. And now, very, very recently, we went ahead and we expanded to a data set of tweets. So we are doing data set expansion right now in a controlled manner. And we are also analyzing the quality of the data sets using Clean Lab and Data Quality Index. So that's work in progress, and also some work remaining to be done. And then for the future, we also want to look more carefully at the non-LIWC features, right? We did quite a bit of study of LIWC features. We also need to do similar studies for non-LIWC features. And of course, we can devise better models. And recently we came up with a new kind of model, and that is still under review. So I don't want to go into too many details right now here, but that's another avenue of future work. So with that, I will list the references that I have used for today's presentation. There are several papers available already, but some are going to appear in December, and some are under review, right? So if you are curious and if you'd like to get hold of some of the papers that have not come out yet, you can always email me. And shameless plug for my book. Some of you may be interested in cybersecurity analytics that was mentioned at the beginning. And I do want to mention this workshop that we are organizing. It's the 10th ACM International Workshop on Security and Privacy Analytics. And this is going to happen in Portugal, co-located with ACM Codespi. Some of you may be interested in submitting your work here. The proceedings of the workshop will be in the ACM Digital Library, and past papers have been pretty well cited, and also downloads are exceeding almost 40,000 now. I do want to mention this project that we are currently doing, eGuard project, where we are trying to improve the cybersecurity training with an emphasis on phishing. And if you're interested, you can take this survey. It's actually, I have put down 20 to 25 minutes, but most participants so far are able to finish it in about 15 minutes. And please participate. And if you do it on a desktop, it's much easier, much less time. On a mobile, it may take a little bit longer, although it is adapted for the mobile as well, the survey. And with that, I'm going to stop here. Thank you all for coming to the presentation, and I will now take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. Yes, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to list those in the Q&A box or the chat box, whichever one is most convenient for you. Those two are located at the bottom of your screen in the toolbar at the bottom of the Zoom window. Dr. Verma, I have a kind of general question, kind of comments on cybersecurity in general. We do these IT security awareness assessments every year. You do some type, a lot of companies now are doing IT assessments where they're quizzing, and in some cases, I've had friends at certain companies receive internal phishing kind of spoof emails to test them on, will they click on a link? Will someone say, oh, it's a gift card, or it's an executive where saying, hey, I need you to purchase this for me. And then, they go click on the link and it pops up to a site saying you were, you clicked on a phishing link. It was actually an internal IT email. Do you think methods like this are effective at securing IT environments, or are they effective ways at ensuring that cybersecurity awareness is kind of at the forefront of a lot of companies' minds, or are there other things they can do, or what else can be done to ensure that cybersecurity is an emphasis point?
Yeah, this is an excellent question that you have brought up. Actually, I was giving a talk at a company, and they brought up this issue that no matter how much you train some of the employees, they are always going to click on some.
Yeah.
The curiosity killed the cat, so to speak. So sometimes some employees have an abundant amount of curiosity, and then they're going to click no matter what kind of training they get.
That's true.
This discussion they were having, that should we penalize them and take away their bonuses, their merit
Oh,
rate,
wow.
and things like that. And then I was reading this article where one employee is suing the company, that you're sending me all these false messages, wasting my time and also upsetting me. So it's like pain and suffering.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you hear of scams as well, where they'll change, it's a legitimate or legitimate looking email address. So, something like mine where it will be RS Lotte, but instead of at memphis.edu, it'll say at it'll be memph1s.edu.
Right.
And people won't pick up on it. They'll just say, oh, hey, this is Rami's asking me for, something, or he's asking me to do something, and, they'll go click on it. So.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. Also, these so-called homographs, right?
Right.
So we actually have some work on homograph analysis and how the accuracy of various deep learning models is affected by the.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well,
so we do find that, unless you're doing something specific to catch these homographs, accuracy drops quite substantially.
Oh, interesting. Okay, did not know that. That's really good. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
I'll be happy to share some work that we did and on homograph analysis, and so one has to be very, very careful about that. I see that there are a couple of questions
It looks
in.
like there's a couple questions. Yeah, so we'll go with the first one submitted. The question was asked, what are your thoughts on the importance of baseline measures to compare deceptive communications?
Baseline measures. So, do you have anything particular in mind as far as baselines go? Um, are you talking about features here or models? It's not quite clear to me. Maybe you can
Yeah,
clarify.
Leah, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your mic so you can. Oh, comparing deceptive speech to non-deceptive speech is what she's saying.
I see. Okay. So comparing deceptive speech to non-deceptive. Okay. So speech, if you convert the speech to text, then we can apply some of our, models and so on. And if you are interested in features such as pauses between, various phrases or words and so on, we haven't used those kinds of features. If you're dealing with speech, maybe you can try those features also. And as far as baseline measures go, maybe you can unmute yourself and clarify, if maybe give an example of what you mean. Oh, okay. So Aruna is asking a question about GAN, using GAN. Yes, we have used GANs, Aruna, in one of our papers in ACM CODASPI last year. We used GANs to actually generate synthetic data to balance the data set. And then so we used a pipeline which we call positive unlabeled learning, and so you try to make use of unlabeled data as well as positive data and also GANs in this pipeline. We did find very good results for phishing, and some of the best detection results were obtained by using this kind of a pipelined architecture in which we had positive unlabeled learning as well as GANs. And that came out last year in CODASPI 2022. Yeah. And the definition does look Bayesian, yes, but it can be operationalized using many different kinds of models. Yeah. Excellent question. Thank you.
Yeah, very much so. Leah, did you want to clarify your earlier question and your follow-up response, or were you satisfied with?
Sure. So Jamie Pennebaker, who developed the Luke program, often talks about the importance of comparing deceptive speech to non-deceptive speech to see the differences between. So it'd be important to compare regular news articles to fake news articles to see the relative rates of the linguistic feature differences between the two. And so comparing just within deceptive speech communications may show relative weights or
I got it.
Is right.
Yeah, I got it. I understand your question now. All our data sets have regular as well as deceptive. So there are two classes for every data set. And so when we are deciding whether a feature is significant or not, we are comparing regular news versus fake news. Yeah. And trying to determine whether there is a significant difference or not, statistically significant difference, right? For example, maybe you are looking at, certain kinds of adverbs or certain kinds of adjectives, and then you can ask, right? For example, superlative forms, are they more, in deceptive news versus regular news or not, and things like that. So we are doing that, yes. Does that answer your question, Lee?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, wonderful. If it looks like there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and end our session a few minutes early. I think you went ahead, Dr. Verma, and throughout your talk today, we're able to answer a lot of questions, it seems like. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining today. This was a great session, and we look forward to welcoming you to our next session. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Verma.
you. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks
Thanks.
for
Bye-bye.
Bye.